Jon Acuff, and today's episode is a special one. Today I get to talk to Sojo. Sojo, if you've never heard of him, has one of those introductions that it kind of sounds like it's made up. He's a rapper, he's a public speaker, he's a leader, he's a creative arts movie studio dude, he's a sneakerhead, and he's probably added a few other titles to his resume because I haven't talked to him in a couple of weeks. He's just that busy, that creative. We first met when we were sharing the stage at a summer camp in Panama City Beach, or PCB, baby, as it's known. We spent the next 6 years traveling around the country on tour with the Orange team, which gave us a great chance to get insight into the way he thinks about goals. In one car ride from the airport, I remember clearly him breaking down his annual process for goal setting, and it fascinated me. This is going to be a really fun conversation where we cover what he's doing with the movie studio in Atlanta, what he's learning from mentors, how he changed the city he was born in, how he grew up with goal setting, which pair of shoes, because he's a sneakerhead, I mentioned, which pair would he leave if the apartment was on fire? There's one pair. It's a pair of Jordans. I'll give you a little spoiler alert. It's an amazing pair of Jordans. We have a really fun conversation, including what he thinks are the three greatest rappers of all time and the number one rapper to come out of Atlanta. The conversation's all over the place, but it all hinges on how do you figure out a goal? How do you lean into a goal? How do you finish your goals? It's going to be an awesome conversation. Ladies and gentlemen, Joseph Sojourner, or as he's commonly called, Sojo. Today's episode is sponsored by Metashare. Have you guys ever had buyer's remorse? You know, that feeling of intense regret because the thing you thought you just had to have was only something you used once or twice. For me, it was the time I bought a really expensive road bike because I thought I was going to get into cycling. I proceeded to hang it on the wall in my garage and feel ashamed for 6 months. Well, I know some of you are experiencing buyer's remorse right now for something much more frustrating. You know what I'm talking about. It's the health care you rushed to get during open enrollment last December. Well, I have some good news for you. You've probably heard me talking about our main sponsor for this podcast, Metashare, and these guys have the answer to healthcare buyer's remorse. Check this out. Members of Metashare save up to 50% or more per month on their healthcare costs. They say the typical family saves up to $500 per month. And here's the best part. You can become a member at any time. So that means it isn't too late to ditch your buyer's remorse and switch to a more affordable healthcare that will save you money and help you sleep better at night. If this is your first time you're hearing about Metashare, it is the best alternative to health insurance that allows you to share the burden of medical bills, offers access to 900,000 plus healthcare providers, and has a proven 25-year track record. Plus, in addition to saving hundreds per month as a member of Metashare, you will also have access to free telehealth and free telecounseling. You won't find that with any traditional health insurance provider. Guys, it only takes 2 minutes to see how much you could save. Go investigate that for yourself and your family at metashare.com/John. That's metashare.com/John. Remember, John doesn't have an H in it. So it's MEDI, that's meta, share, SHARE.com/JON. All right, Sojo, thanks for joining me today. I'm going to be honest, I'm not a very good interviewer. I want to come right out and say that, but I promise 3 things. Number 1, I'm not going to talk over you. I read a bunch of 1-star reviews on other podcasts and people hate that. So I'm going to use every bit of listening I've learned in counseling, marriage counseling specifically, because you don't have to learn how to listen when it's just you. Number 2, if I can't find a natural transition to my next question, I'm just going to say like, hey, I have another question, and there'll be no flow. And number 3, I won't mention that you're a handsome, single, successful guy living in the greater Atlanta area and open to love, because I don't want things to get awkward. The last thing I want is just people trying to find you.
Wow. This is a great way to start. I don't think I've ever started a podcast so great.
Yeah, well, I mean, everybody starts the same way. Like, what are you up to? How's your year? Like, and because we're friends, I can start this way.
I was supported. I was offended, all in one.
Yeah.
In one opening.
Yeah, it's kind of a potpourri of emotions. So the thing we're going to talk about today is goals. We got a bunch of great goal questions, but I want to start our conversation with something you're not doing. You deleted all your posts from Instagram, and your bio just says loading new chapter, ... So what does that mean?
Yeah, I get to the end of the year, and it was one of those things that we all look back at 2020 and said, what did we learn? And the last 4 months of 2020, I just decided to just step away from social media altogether, period. And it was really just that personal journey of saying, who am I without social media? And I just thought it was a really great process. It started small, kind of built. And in the end, it was, hey, this year you found yourself in ways that really you never had before. And so, yeah, it was the last act, the rebellious act that happened at about 11:43, spontaneous, but it just felt like the last thing I needed to do in 2020. And so it happened right at the end.
Did you delete them individually, or is there some sort of like death button you press on Instagram that's like 10 layers deep?
It was 11:43 to like 1 a.m. One by one, they make you delete them. It's the worst.
Ooh, that's like when the gym makes you come and sign a piece of paper that says you're a quitter, like before you can cancel your membership.
It's just crazy though. Like, but like when you start doing it, you get like, there's like this moment where you get like 5 years back in your life and you're forgetting stuff. 'Cause who scrolls down on their own grid unless they're like narcissistic, you know? But,
nobody's narcissistic.
But I get down 5 years, I'm like, oh man, I forgot. So then I'm getting sappy. Now I'm texting people at 1 a.m. It's weird. These weird texts.
That's so funny. Was it painful at all? Did you ever think like, okay, I don't want to delete this. I can leave 3. Like, what if I leave just like 3 of my best looking sides?
That's what I always do. That's why I said, no, here's what you're going to start doing. You're going to start making excuses and then you're going to chicken out. And I said, nope, see this through, start over, 2021, here we are.
And I think it's important to know, because I think there's people listening that have gone through similar situations. Like, you've got 20, 30,000 followers. It's not that you don't have any followers. Like, you have a pretty good core audience that you're not creating content for, and you have a great eye. Like your Instagram stories, you have a visual personality where you go, here's this, here's this, here's this, here's this. Have you always thought, okay, I'm going to do some kind of reduction goals? Because I would call this a reduction goal. Okay, if this thing's in my life, I don't want it in my life. How long are you going to do it for? Did you set a time frame? Like, walk me through it.
Yeah, so it was really, practically speaking, I felt like I do love beauty. And so whether it's creativity, beauty, storytelling, that's what I felt like I had nailed on my grid and stories. But I felt like what I lacked was a little bit of the mess. And so I think, like, you know me, John, like you'll sit and have coffee with me and get to see like the Joe that's confused, that doesn't quite know exactly what his next step is or like how to handle in these moments and these stages and these chapters. And so I felt like when people were looking at my grid, they only saw the highlights. And it wasn't even intentional. This is just someone who every time I see beauty, I snap a picture and want to share it. So I'm not even trying to put on or anything. I'm just like, I literally love it that much. But I thought, you know what, if I had to start over, of course, I'm always going to pay homage to beauty. But at this time, I'm also going to be honest enough to be like, I need to be intentional to capture more of the honest process, mess, whatever you want to call it. But yeah, so hopefully in the future, it really will be, they'll have a deeper, more authentic understanding of me and not just kind of like what catches my eye and what I really respect and like.
Do you think that certain social media platforms are better for that than others? You know, would a podcast be a place where you could be more honest, where Instagram is like, it's visual, people expect the highlight, it tends to be highlight. You know, what are your thoughts on that?
Hands down. I mean, hands down. And it's also partially what you follow. I mean, when I have my podcast list, it really is more authentic who I follow on Instagram. A long time ago, I decided to be very intentional as to who I was going to follow. And so a lot of who I follow is like culture shapers, creators, makers, artisans, all that. So like when I open up my Instagram, my grid, I should say my timeline is just a bunch of, it's got everything on it, but it is a lot of curators and content creators. Whereas podcasts, it's conversations. And so, podcasts will always be a space where it's very easy for me to just say, okay, let's talk about it. Beauty aside, let's get into it.
Did you delete the people you're following too? Did you unfollow everybody?
No, I didn't do that. Okay. I felt like that'd be offending. People call my phone.
People would be like, what did we do wrong? Right?
You already know. And then they got that follow app. It's like, why we even got that app?
That shouldn't exist. That should just be called insecurity app.
Yeah, thank you.
Ruin your day app. I don't need to know who doesn't like me. I already think most people don't. I don't need an app that confirms it.
I said, brother, you're 29. Delete that app. You don't need that app.
So
Come on, man.
Yeah, you're not trying to go to the prom, dude. Like, pump the brakes. You ain't asking for a prom date. You're a grown man.
You're the director over your department. Why do you have that?
You have a business card with raised letterhead. Like you have something embossed in your life. You should not have the unfollow app. Maybe they should say that on the App Store. It should say, if you own a belt, please don't download this app.
You have a belt.
That's so good. Okay, you're not sharing stuff publicly. I'm assuming on Instagram, Twitter, like, did you go scorched earth?
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, I'm starting to walk back into it now. So, yeah, now I'm beginning to kind of get back and walk back into it, determine my boundaries and say, oh, hey, how much? Because it really was just like, hey, what's crazy is I never was even that irresponsible with social media as far as how much I use it. It really is, I check it in the morning, check it midday, check it in the evening. It was more just, what do you want to say and how do you want to say it? And so it really was that. So
you're going back.
I'm going back. I'll be back. I've gotten a lot of DMs.
Yeah, I bet you do. Right now, that's a creative outlet for you. So the creativity doesn't go away. If you're using that to express beauty or share ideas, where are those ideas going right now?
Okay, so now that brings up kind of like, so, for the past 5 years, people have known me for working in the church realm and the spectrum. It's been great, but in 2020, everything shifted. And so I ended up working on a movie studio a lot now. And so now I'm walking with people who, some of which are fond of the church, other people don't really care about the church, other people don't like the church, all of which you're making these relationships, talking to these people, you're creating art together, no matter what you think, believe, or do. It really was a place that kind of awakens you again and says, okay, man, these people really value authenticity. And when I say these people, they're just like us, like people value authenticity. And so it really just made me stop and say, I think you can be challenged to do even more, and that's the beauty of these type of places. And by saying that, I mean Trill Studios here in Atlanta. And so it really challenged me to say, you know what? Are you being as honest? Is the story you're telling truly your story or pieces of it? So.
Well, and let's jump back to that, because in the intro, I'm probably going to say you have one of those resumes that sounds almost made up. There's so many different facets of it. It's like rapper, public speaker, leader, artist. So you're working at a movie studio. It's a movie studio in Atlanta, which is kind of on the forefront of a lot of movie studios moving there, developing things. You've got Stranger Things, The Walking Dead, all these things that are kind of in the pipeline have really blown up. How did you get connected to the movie studio? How do you make that pivot?
Come on, man. Isn't that crazy? Like so 2 years ago, I'm hanging with some friends and New Year's, the ball drops and every time I'm like, you got to make it bold, crazy. And so I'm known as like a guy that goes around and talks about Jesus. And I'm like, man, I went to college for electronic media production and theater. Those are my two things. I always wanted to be like a director, got scared at the last second, chickened out. And so I was like, you know what? I want to go back to my first love. And that is like storytelling. But I said movies, but now we would say storytelling.
It's meta. It's more meta.
And then in California, I'm out teaching and I bump into a guy that is pretty key and integral here at the studios. We start chatting. He's like, let's just bring you down and show you around. And when I'm going around, I just start commenting, kind of doing what I do. And that is, hey, what do you think about this? Why don't you guys think about this? And why doesn't there a place that doesn't just care about what we create, but also about the creatives who created it? And so that leads to more conversations, which leads to a podcast. I'm doing it, did that for about 6 months. And that's really when the studio began to say, these creatives that are here are going to this podcast because really, yes, for the live recording, but also for the networking and community that they have. And then they're beginning to make relationships. And that's, I think, when the studio placed priority on saying, we need someone who's a director of experience. And what is the Trill experience? And that's thankfully what I was asked to lead.
So it didn't exist. So, because that's an interesting idea. Like you talk about goals. Sometimes you go, I want to apply for a job, but it doesn't exist. And you go, there's a lot of jobs you have to create before they exist.
Come on now.
And that's what happened in this situation.
Yup. It's being bold enough to see what's not there. And which is entrepreneurship, right?
Yeah. What was the name of the podcast?
So Studio Gathering. It was a Studio Gathering podcast. Yep.
How is this different than another podcast? Because it sounds like it got some momentum in a different way.
What was interesting is it was the equipment they had was pretty janky. I can't even lie. It wasn't like the best equipment. So a lot of times I was like, these first few episodes didn't love it, but the room felt great because it was a live audience we would do it with. Mm-hmm. So the room felt great. And the hang after the podcast was better than the podcast. And so it made us take a pause and say, okay, if we were going to do this, let's do it right. And so we're in the process of looking at it again and launching it in a way that's a little more appropriate for the excellence level that Trill would expect.
I love the hang after. Do you
Yeah.
see other parts of your life where you go in thinking this is going to be the thing, and then it's the hang after or the hang
Come on.
before that ends up being the thing?
Yep. Yep. What if somebody once told me, they said, someone's going to hire the person they want to hang out with at 3 a.m. in the morning. They said that's the easiest way. But I really think that it more or less is saying, like, are you someone that I trust? That's a witty way of saying, do I trust you? Do I enjoy your company? But more importantly, there's so many ways you can learn something, but there's not a lot of ways you can authentically connect with someone. And so you're right. The hang after, it ends up having way more value to your heart than just another tidbit of information for your head. So yeah, I've definitely realized in designing, because, before this, I had an events company. So that's why I've been working with a lot of conferences. But yes, I would say in designing conference after conference, gathering after gathering from business to whatever, it was very clear this next generation does value time to just authentically connect.
And they're not getting it right now. That's the challenge with kind of the current state of the world. I would say that it was the hang after, the hang before, where we really got to connect, both at camps and touring with Orange. And in one of those car rides, because we would do the thing, like a lot of events where like, hey, we got 4 speakers coming in, like, let's make them all get into a Kia Sportage together, and then they can ride to the hotel together. And so it creates this community. But I started to talk to you about your goals, and it was in the fall. So it was kind of tail end of the year. That's when we were traveling together. And you had a really specific, deliberate, thoughtful, life-giving way to kind of think through your goals. Like, imagine somebody's listening to this and maybe they didn't set some New Year's resolutions. Maybe they never have. Maybe they've never set goals, but they want to go, okay, I want to kind of reevaluate some things. How do you reevaluate the year you just went through and the year you're headed toward?
It's grown over the years. It used to be simple, but here's it in 3 buckets. October now, October is my personal reflection. So it's like, who was I to my friends, to my family? So my buckets are personal and professional, and then who do I want to be my future? So my first bucket's personal. So I'm like, who was I as a man to my friends? And I mean, I go through it. I would say for a lot of years, that was a hard one for me because I always felt like I wanted to be the best kind of friend I could be, the most intentional kind of brother, son. And then comes professionally. Okay, who I am professional. Am I getting out of my comfort zone? That's November. Hard. Anyone that works for me knows, like, November Joe's going to be quiet, very introspective, and then comes December. And December is when I say, okay, now that you've learned everything from October to November, it's time to figure out who you want to be. And so December is all making my plan for January, which is why you'll see that such a big action step at the very end of December before going into 2021. And delete the whole grid. It's time for us to start it. But that comes after some reflection, October and November, and then comes a month of planning as to, okay, so how do you grow? How do you do better? How do you never stop learning and growing? And that's December.
So are you, from a specific practical approach, is this a notebook you're using? Are you carrying over questions from the year before that you're always like, it's good to ask this question? Are you asking other people? Like, are you sitting down with friends and going, hey, here's how I thought. What did you see? Like, walk me through some of that.
Yeah, if it's a conversation that needs to be had, a lot of it is me sitting down with a blank page. And I just learned that for me, plus a blank page is where magic happens. And so even if I were to sit down right now and say, Jon and me, how do I think I could be a better friend to Jon? What I'm going to put on that page to me is my truest self. And I don't know why it's harder for me to do that verbally if we were to just sit at a coffee shop and try and talk. But it's like after that coffee shop, if I write about it, it just comes alive in a way I'm able to kind of look at it outside myself. And so it really is a lot of me writing to myself in the personal and professional. And it's funny, like, especially when you write for staff, you start writing about them and then they come alive in just I'm pretty nostalgic and sentimental, so that's probably why that happens. But when you start writing about them, you see them differently. And then when you see them differently, you talk to them differently. And so it's a lot of just writing.
You're doing this process, you're using paper, pen, computer, and then it transitions from reflection, personal, professional, to what, where's the step where, or how do you grind all that reflection into, here's a practical thing I'm going to do this year? Like, are you doing number based? Is it like, I'm going to try to, like, one of my goals is I want to run with my buddy Ruben 26 times this year. We run on Sundays and, like, it's a great moment for us to connect. We talk. And I know we're not going to do it every Sunday because that's not reasonable, because he's got 4 kids. I got 2 kids. Like, it's not happening.
Yeah.
How are you turning all that into trackable, cross off a listable ideas?
Yep. So it's one, and one. So I take one track, I guess, so to say trackable. And so personal, I'll say, hey, personally, I want to do better at texting back because I'm the worst. And so that was my personal. It's like the one thing that seems consistent through all of these texting. So, and then professionally, I want to be more confident in my decision making for creativity and less stop overthinking things and worrying so much. And then one dream, I always put down a dream, which right now I think I'm still trying to format exactly what I want that dream to be. But yeah, so that's trackable. And then there's the 100 more personalized ones that have to do with each person. But those aren't as much like the defined ones as far as like boom, boom, boom. Those are more next time I see you, I remember everything I wrote. And so now I'm going to talk to you different and probably tell you some of the things I now see.
Yeah, here's something I was reflecting about. Here's something I care about.
Mm-hmm.
What was a goal that you felt really good about accomplishing in the last 2 years? Because 2020 was a weird year, but like in the last 2 years when you're like, oh, I really worked on this thing and I did this thing and it worked.
Yeah, being present. I mean, I think that started naturally. I'll always go future. I mean, if you let me run my truest self, I'm not even going to really pay attention to the present, less known the past. It's like, what's ahead? What new exciting idea? And so, yeah, I would say being present in these last 2 years, I have put so many things in place to make sure I stop and reflect, which is kind of what you're seeing, several different ways to stop and reflect. And a lot of the end of the year is because I'm so future forward. I'll never look back over a year. I mean, if I didn't intentionally have this system at the end, I would keep running into a new year talking about forward, and never really be able to give appreciation to everything I've done. And that just came off of having conversations with people where you're telling them, man, hey, you remember when you told me this? Look at this. Hey, you remember when you told me we were going to do this? Look. And then they're like, wow, I didn't notice it. And then I'm like, man, I don't even do that. Like, how come I don't do what I do for others? And so it's more or less like, hey, be present and notice what's happening right here, right now.
Are you good at celebrating?
No.
Like, because a lot of high performing people, they're on to the next thing. And somebody go, that was amazing. You're like, oh, was it? That was yesterday. That was like a year ago. Are you good at celebrating milestones?
Real talk, I want to lie right now and be like, man, I'm so good. I celebrate, but I know all my friends and work people who work for me love you. So I know they're going to listen to this and they will call me out and say, we have told you over and over, you don't celebrate. And I'm like, you're totally right. It is because you're right. It's hard. And not to sound cocky, because it's not at all. When someone's like, did you think that this would happen? I will be like, yeah. Remember that I always explain like this. When first base is my celebration. And I have to tell staff this every time they work with me. And I'm like, most people celebrate when they get there at home plate. I celebrate when I see it on first base. And so when I see something, I'll run around the office. I mean, I'm running like, oh, do you see this? Do you see this idea? In that moment, I see it all. I mean, I see everything. And then so by time 5 months later, when we're there and we're doing it, that is a 5-month-old vision. And so when people are like, man, isn't this awesome? I'm like, well, yeah, I already did my celebration. And I tell them, it's not that I don't celebrate, it's that I celebrate on a different base than you do. I celebrate on first base. So I've had to learn to also celebrate on home base for those who work alongside me. So
that's good, because some projects, I mean, if you release a book, it's a 2-year process. So if you celebrated getting the manuscript accepted and it doesn't come out for a year, then you know, like the home plate is a long way from first base. And
which is why you have books, and I know.
So funny.
That's why your book finish was so important.
There you go, right?
It gave me a lot of keys because I said, I think I need to carry it.
So your background, you're a goal guy. Did you learn that from your parents? Is that something that you would say, you know what? I saw my mom do this. I saw my dad do this. Like, where did this come from?
Man,
an appreciation of goals, because it's not natural. I don't know if it's natural. I think some people are probably natural that way, but I think a lot of people learn it and then they're like, oh, I just got me a roadmap. I'm going to use this roadmap going forward. How did it happen for you?
Yeah, no, I mean, I wish my dad was more present, but he wasn't present much after the second grade. My mom was definitely someone who was a goal setter, but she wasn't a dreamer. My mom was like, now she'll knock it out. Like everything she says she's going to do in a week, she's going to knock it all out. I don't know how she had capacity, but I was someone who, as a little tyke, I was like, I'm getting out of Akron, Ohio. I know one thing's true. I got to get out of this city. And so from there, everyone will be like, okay, what are you going to do? And I got tired of looking stupid. And so then you got to figure out what you want to do. And then okay, so then I had some really great leaders and men in my life who would then say, well, how are you going to get there? What's your first step? And I feel like they didn't as much teach me goals as much as tangible action steps. And once I saw that and realized, okay, this is all it takes, one step at a time, I think I just naturally was like, I got to make a move. And I'm naturally pretty ambitious and adventurous to be like, just jump. Like, never really had that qualm. So I think once I see it, it's like, I'm ready. I'm ready to go right now. So, yep. As simple
when
as
did
that.
you first think I got to get out of Akron? And that's not an insult to Akron, but like,
not at all.
There's people listening right now that have I got to do blank. I got to launch this. When did you start to first get that feeling? What age?
I would say right around middle school for real. I mean, because when you're a kid, I'm just trying to figure out. And so for those who don't really know my story, I was bullied a lot as a child. So I didn't have friends all the way till 12th grade. And so I think a lot of it was just my form of escapism of just saying, I got to get, this city doesn't understand me and a bigger city will. And so I would say it probably was pretty skewed as a kid. And you don't know any better. You're just like, when I get out of here. But I would say as I got towards college, I really was like, I want to go to a place where it was such a blue collar town. And I love that so much now. Like, I'm like, man, now I get why Akron, I am who I am because of the pace and the kind of people that Akron had all around me. But it was harder to dream. I think dreaming was something that was a luxury in Akron and much different than a larger city. And so if you're a kid or someone in a small town and you're thinking, I got to get out, that's an awesome thought, but it's putting those action steps to it and then really realizing you're going to look back like Laney's new album when he's like loving Oklahoma now, even though he went to LA. You'll get to a larger city and then appreciate the foundation that a smaller city teaches you. And so I'm so grateful for Akron now.
And your story, because I know it, I remember we had lunch at the Austin airport, me, you, and our friend Amy. And the Austin airport, their food bangs. Like, it's good. Like, it's actually, I know you're like, oh, you ate in an airport. Why do you hate Sojo? Like, it was good. It was good food. But we talked about your family scenario. You mentioned it briefly a minute ago about your dad, because I'd love to hear you riff on that a little bit, because I think a lot of times people get to 20s, 30s, 40s, and they go, I can't start a business because my dad never taught me how to be an entrepreneur. I can't, be this because I didn't have a family structure. And they might look at a guy like you and go, Sojo must have had two parents that pulled him back like a slingshot and launched him on a foundation. And his dad taught him how to throw a spiral football in the 11th grade and how to shave and put on a tie. And I know that's not your background, but what would you, explain your family dynamic? And then if you had a minute to talk to somebody who said, I didn't have a dad, what you would say to encourage them?
I mean, I would say that from a young age, I always loved the movies that had the underdog, the kid with the orphan. We all love the stories when we watch a movie, right? And you're like, oh, the orphan kid had the resilience to keep going. And I really think I believed it. I was just crazy enough to say, okay, so although there's 100 wounds you don't know you have when you don't have a dad, that probably don't begin appearing until you're in your 20s and 30s. There's a lot of people right now who are probably like, yup. And you begin to say, like, why did I react like that? Why am I so guarded in certain ways? There's also this fortitude that you're forced to have that really you can give thanks for down the road. And so, yeah, I think it was one of those things that I look at now and I say, especially when I get around an extremely healthy family. I mean, I'm around a lot of great families where I'm watching like little kids with their dads. And I'm like, wow, that is an awesome picture that I never got to experience. However, what I did experience was a lot of men at my church specifically who were just really, it took a village is what they would say. And so really, I had some great mentors who poured into me. More importantly, I think I chose my friends wisely and I understood like, if I don't have a dad, I need to be really, really strategic with the kind of friends that I know are going to push me and challenge me and not just be yes men. And to this day, I'm still the same way. I'm like, hey, I'm as serious about my friendships because of the fact that I understood that the kind of friends I chose at a young age really, truly did offer perspectives I never could have had by myself.
How do you think you put yourself in a position for mentors to help you? Because I think you can be mentor resistant and go like, I just want wisdom. And then you've got like 50 walls and nobody can even get in. How did you as a young man, as a current man? Because I know right now there's wise leaders speaking into you. If your goal was, I want to have a mentor, I want to get more wisdom from somebody who's further down the road? How do you put yourself in that position?
Man, I feel like I'm naturally wired to choose to trust. Like I do think I'm going to trust every single person that walks in the room until proven otherwise. But when it came to mentors, I just think you got to trust your gut in a lot of ways. And there's sometimes like someone will just start talking. For example, the first time you and me hang out, Jon, I mean, all I know about you is, you're a funny guy. You're a funny guy and clean cut, and you're on a bunch of stages. So I'm like, you're more of a caricature than a real guy. And it wasn't until you like opened up, and it sounds so whimsical, but I'm like, you can see in someone's eyes, you can genuinely see authenticity and feel it. And when you feel it, you now have a decision. Do I want to pretend, or do I want to be the real me? And so I feel like I've always understood that in the moment you feel the movie beginning, which is a scene between two people, it's like you're either in that scene present, or you're going to end up putting a mask on and pushing people away. And so I think basically going back to your original point, for me, the greatest gift I have as an adult now is understanding that there's a story that happens in every single person's head, and I have more control over my story than anyone else. And I tell this to a lot of kids from the hood because I'm like, it's going to be easy to try and blame anyone else for your story. And some of that's legit. Like some of it is like I'm facing hardship because of some obstacles that have been placed in my way that are pressing against me and wearing me out. But even after that, you still have more power over your story than you could ever even imagine. And the more you see it, which is stuff that the men would tell me growing up, the more you understand what you can do. And they would shove me and be like, hey, you have it. And I'm thinking like, do I have it? And sure enough, I began to see it. And I'm like, oh my gosh, maybe I do have it. And to this day, it doesn't matter if I'm calling someone on lunch break and I'm like, I got to tell you a situation because I'm tempted to write a story in my head. Here's what's happening. They're like, you did write some of the story. It's like, hey, don't. Like right now, this is all that there is. All the rest of that is fiction. And so I do think always keeping hold of the story, taking every thought captive is what the Bible would have said.
Which is why I called you. I mean, I called you when I was writing my book about overthinking, about, the title soundtracks. And we talked about, you used the word story. I'd use the word soundtrack on what's the soundtrack playing right now in this situation. What is it a true soundtrack? Is it kind? Is it the one you want playing? I loved getting to connect with you about that idea because it was super helpful. And I think it's interesting when I ask you questions, you're quick to call up a story or an idea. I'm curious, do you have an idea capture system? So what I mean by that is you bump into, it used to be on Instagram, you'd share something, but like you hear a story, you learn something, a leader speaks into you, something good, some new idea blossoms. Where does that idea go? Does it go into a notebook? Does it go into Evernote? Does it go on the wall? Like, I want to know, like, they used to do that cartoon where like how a bill becomes part of the Constitution. Like, walk me from idea to like it's actually executed and it lives and breathes in the world.
Evernote built my career. Hands down.
That's the tweet. That's the tweet.
Evernote built that thing. The notebooks allow me to be able to capture an idea, but I did download stuff. I'm definitely an app guy. So I'm like, there's a new app called Things. And so as soon as I think an idea, what I love about it is I'm able to capture the idea and then start adding on my to-do things. And so I was noticing, and the reason why I went to Things over Evernote is because it is more of a task management app. And I'm fast to dream. Like literally today, I could be walking. I'm like, man, it'd be cool here if we like did like a lemonade idea here. And I'll throw it down. Then I realize I got 13 other ideas in front of it. And so I realized, let me shift and go towards, I capture an idea. And now as soon as I capture it, I give myself 30 minutes to put 2 action steps behind it. And if after those 2 action steps, it doesn't feel like it's tangible, I let it go. I delete it. And you
delete it. You don't keep it. You don't keep it. I think that's key because you can keep a lot of old ideas that get in the way of the good ones.
Yep. But you told me that.
You clear it out.
We were chatting and you were like, there's like beer ideas and wine.
And wine
I remember
ideas.
You said it. Yeah. And I said, dang, I think I got a bunch of beer ideas.
Yeah. You got a lot of natty light seltzer up in there. Yeah.
And so I remember when I got done talking, I thought like, man, I got to start figuring out which ones are my beer, which ones are my wine. And that's when I decided to shift my app. And that's how Evernote lost me as a customer.
That's so fun. That's when you moved to Things. I love that.
I moved to Things.
I love that. There's no such thing as an average day, but walk me through your ideal day.
So an ideal day, Oh, an ideal day is
And it's a work day. I didn't, if it's Saturday and you're like, I just sleep in all day, like that's not that interesting. And it's an ideal work day where like you're at peak performance, your peak connection, like all that.
anytime you can hand me a dream, if it's your dream, and I can help you see it even clearly or even help figure out how to make sense of it, that's going to be an ideal day. It's the one thing I think I realized when I said, what do you put on this planet to do? I said, you can get paid for this. It doesn't matter if you're working or on an off day, you're hanging out with somebody around a fire pit. Like, you're going to eventually get to their dream, and you're eventually going to say, hey, man, what do you think about this? And I think I absolutely love the opportunity to handle someone's dream with care, which is what I get to do on a daily basis now as we build an entire town and continue to work with people's movies. They bring an idea in, they bring a shop that they want to do and say, we want to do gelato. And from that moment on, it's like, how do we want to create an experience around gelato? And I think being able to say, I don't think you're daring the dream enough. I think you can go even more. And when that starts awakening in people, it's crazy how people almost need permission to just be wild and dream fully. And so I get to do that on a daily basis.
Like, why do you think they don't know that they have permission?
Man, ain't that crazy? I was with Bob Goff in his Dream Big camp, and I remember listening to people, and I don't have any kids. So, for me, my dreaming is like what I do to pass time, because otherwise I'm kind of going crazy probably. But I never thought about the fact that a mother could say, I've dreamed about my kids for the last 10 years, and I've got a great home. My kids are doing really good. I feel guilty to think that I should be able to dream for myself after I've been blessed with so much. And I remember they said it, and I thought, wow, it's such an interesting perspective to say. I almost feel guilty to dream. And then there's obviously the ones that are just too afraid to fail. And so they're like, let me just dream in moderation. But for me, I'm like, oh my gosh, dream for the kids, dream for yourself, dream for your husband, dream for your neighbor, dream for the dog. I'm like, come on now, there's never enough dreams. And then what do you do about them? And so, but I do think it taught me a lot. I think it really showed me that I said, there's real life situations where people are just like, dreaming is a luxury, and I'd rather deal in reality. I'd rather deal in dreams and then change reality. And so I think once I understood that about myself, I said, okay, well then I guess I'll be one of those. I'll be one of these guys who are more going to always be like, let's get back to the clouds.
Let's make it bigger. Make it bigger. Well, one thing I know that you love, talking about dreams, talking about passions, is it fair to say you're a sneakerhead? Okay.
One could say, sure.
Yeah, one could say you love sneakers. And I love that about you. Like, that's one of the things that I really enjoy about you. Because when we get to do events, I'm essentially like Joan Rivers, rest in peace. She's up there criticizing Jesus' clothes right now. One of the things I would say, what are you wearing? What are those? What are those? What are those? Yeah. So how many, and this is, hey, there's no judgment. This is no like, oh, I can't believe he owns this. Like, I think people have a hard time with success. I think, especially in certain circles, they get real shy about enjoying good things. We have an enjoyment problem, I think, in a lot of circles where we can't admit we enjoy something and then ball out with it. Yeah. But you go all in on shoes, and I love that. How many pairs of sneakers right now do you own?
I'd say I'm probably at about 50 pairs of sneakers. How about 45 sneakers? Because that does not include like boots, dress shoes, casual. Yeah. So sure. I'll say 45 sneakers. I've done a couple purchases over the last few years. And here's what people know about sneakers now. You might buy them at $200, but you can flip them for $700. They're investments if you know what you're doing. And
how many flips have you done?
Man, I've got a couple I'm holding on to that I think are going to quadruple in value, but I would say I've probably done, double digit flips. I'm not going to act like I'm not a sneaker salesman. There are people who sell up in the trunk of the car, but I'm like, I've got a nice amount of flips.
Yeah, it's not MC Hammer selling his first album.
The problem is my friends be broke, and so they be having to just give them discounts, and I need rich friends.
No, that's not, you can't flip something to somebody who doesn't have the money.
That's what I'm saying. The problem is I'm too nice. That's why.
How many pairs of Jordans? 45 pairs of shoes. How many Jordans?
Jordans are probably about 8-9 pairs. So I grew up in Akron, Ohio, LeBron James. So what is he on? Sneaker 18 now? He's on 18. And so I've got every pair. I get each pair of LeBrons that come out. So we could
one pair or two pairs. Are you doing the wear and keep? Just one pair?
Whatever the first LeBron that comes out, because he does like 10 versions of each shoe. And so I get the first version of the 18s, the first version of the 17. And so I have the first versions of all the LeBrons. And so that's where a good chunk of my shoes come in. And then I'm a little bit, so when I really calculate, it might be a bit more now. I don't know. I have to go in there and count the boxes now. I don't know.
Where do you keep them? Are they all in your apartment?
Yeah. It's crazy because when I look at the apartments, I'm like, I got the loft, more space than I ever need, but I judge hard on a closet. I'm like, I need to see the closet space. Just make sure
they probably don't even show you at first. They probably don't worry about the closet. You're like, hold up, pump the brakes.
Look at these vaulted ceilings, this balcony.
Like, I'm not stacking shoes. Yeah.
So give me to the closet. Okay, this is an option. Now we can go back and check everything else. Yeah, they go up. They go up to I'm 6'3" with a great wingspan, so I can get up there. I can stack them high. This ain't for the short kids.
I could only own like 7 pairs of shoes, it sounds like, depending on how high this stack is. What's the craziest thing you've done to get a pair? And I mean, like, I stayed up till 3 a.m. for a drop. I waited outside, I camped outside in College Park. Like, what's the thing you've done where you're like, oh man, that was my most sneakerhead moment?
I would just say I'm really good at knowing how to get there on an app nowadays, but to get to the store. So in Akron, I had a bunch of connects. So I would have people at the Foot Locker. They would sneak and hold it. So it's relationships. It's how you love others that show you to give love back. So I've never had to do. That's it. It's networking. It's like you got to play to your gifts. And I'm like, value people. And they're going to be like, Joe, I got you on size 12. And I say, I'm on my way.
That's funny.
Always.
Okay. There's a fire. You can only grab one pair of sneakers.
Oh,
like, what are you running out with?
Oh man, this is
the off-whites. Isn't that what they're called?
I do have some off-whites. I've got the Dior Jordan 1s that came out, and so I would say I probably, based on a true sneakerhead, would know you need to grab those Dior Jordan 1s. And so,
see, I think there's like 7 people that are going to hear this and be like, "Awesome, nice." I think a lot of people will be like, "Stop talking about sneakers."
Why are
John.
they talking about this so long?
Well, the reason I'm talking about it is I do think a hobby is part of a goal. Like, I think a hobby is like just a goal with more joy on it. So for me, like, I don't separate. There's Sojo over here doing all his goals, and then he's got a hobby. I think it's all one person, one idea, one approach. And I think that high performance goal people don't have enough hobbies. I'm always shocked when I ask somebody, "Hey, what are your hobbies?" And they go, "Oh, I'm too busy for hobbies." And they say it like they're bragging. I think, oh, that's one step closer to burnout. Like, if you can't give yourself a hobby, what are your other hobbies other than sneakers?
Other than the sneakers. Oh, geez. My problem is I have too many. There's nothing I don't think could be my hobby. You know me. I am the guy. But I would say I definitely love food. Now that I'm down here in Fayetteville where there's all this land, I've gotten really comfortable. Yeah, getting out off-roading. Love travel. I think travel's probably my number one hobby. Just getting out. And I'm a documentary nerd. Like nerd. Like a lot of people, somebody asked me, I said, put it like this. They say, if you had to delete Netflix versus YouTube, I would never delete YouTube because it has so many little documentaries that are like 10 minutes to 15. And I'm like, and I watch probably a documentary a day. I mean, I'm a history junkie.
I think that's a fun mix because you said 3 very different things: documentaries, off-roading in Fayetteville, and being a sneakerhead. And usually, like, the Venn diagram of that human is pretty narrow. Like, very rarely somebody's like, I love my off-whites and I love my off-roading. Like, those are my 2. I got the Dior's and I got the duck boots.
One of us, like, I'm exploring, and one of them I'm free. Like, this is a new hobby. Okay, off-roading, let's see if I can get in this thing. Okay, it's a bit crazy. I don't know if it's going to last for more than a year, but we're going to do it.
I'm going to try it. Do you have an off-roading vehicle? Or are you going with friends?
No, so I got a truck, but now everyone's got the 4-wheelers. And so I'm like, okay, we got the 4-wheelers, and there's so many little devices, little vehicles that everyone's hopping in. So I've really learned to, I'm like, okay, here we go.
Okay. I love that. Last 2 questions. Top 5 rappers of all time.
Oh my gosh.
If you want to do top three, I'll save you some time.
Okay, Jay-Z's hands down my favorite rapper of all time. I'm going to say, I'll give it up to Drake. I will say consistency. I have to give it to Drake. He's been consistent for over a decade now. Kanye's last couple albums were like, but I mean, it's just that catalog when he was in his prime that I still don't think can be touched.
Graduation?
Graduation, College Dropout, My Beautiful Dark. I mean, it's just like he was on another level. And so, yeah, I'll give it to those three for now.
Okay.
There's so many great rappers.
Best
Nelly.
rapper, Nelly. With the Saint Lunatics? Not a lot of people remember the Saint Lunatics.
I should have offended everyone and just said like Nelly,
Yeah, Cisco. Cisco when he broke off from Drew Hill.
And like Nelly Furtado on verse 3. Like, what?
Oh, yeah. Nelly when she was with Timbaland. That's it. Yeah. What's the best rapper to come out of Atlanta of all time?
Oh, Andre 3000. Hands down.
It's a blowout, right?
Oh, there's no doubt. Andre 3000.
Yeah.
Still.
Yeah. Different level. Okay. Last question. Where can people find you? Because I think people want to know, you're going to start posting again. I've checked your blog. Like, we're 100%. Waiting. Where can people find you?
Yeah, it's a lot of exciting adventures ahead here at Trilla. So you can find me at Joseph Sojourner, and that's everything. So that's going to be josephsojourner.com, Twitter, Instagram, and trying to determine if I want to jump into this TikTok world. But yeah, Joseph Sojourner on all those platforms, and you will be able to find me, and let's run and have some fun.
So you're not on TikTok yet?
I'm not on TikTok. I mean, I have a page, but it's like, do I really want to do this?
It just feels like I got to learn a lot of dances. And I don't know if I have that amount of time right now for the dances. And I'm also a 45-year-old dad. So I don't see a single way I can do it without looking like I should be in jeans and white New Balances as a 45-year-old dad. Like, I see no way around that reality.
100%.
At least you're cool. Like, if we're hanging out together, people will be like, man, that Sojo is cool. And they say, that Jon is funny. And those are different words.
I feel like funny plays well. I just don't know. I just got to figure out what I even want to do. It's like, what? How does this? What is this? What's the point of this? I only got how much time? And then I got to just think about, when you're on a day, when you're doing all these things in a day, you got to think like, okay, what do I want to do on TikTok? I can't capture something and show it because it's not that kind of app. So you got to know, you got to do something on this thing. And it's like, okay, what?
Yeah, so, I don't know. We'll see. Again, or like Clubhouse. People are getting on Clubhouse right now. I'm like, am I supposed to be on Clubhouse? So yeah, it's always interesting what comes out new. But dude, this was a blast. I really appreciate you doing it with me. It's always fun to travel with you. I hope we get back on the road here. And this will be the first person I got to ask about sneaker collections on the Gold podcast.
Hopefully many more.
Well, yeah, I mean, maybe I'll just that'll be one of my regular rapid fire questions like people do at the end. And people will be like, I don't own that many shoes. I'll be like, but how many? And then I'll say, which is your favorite pair? And they'll be like, they're just all shoes. And I'll go, oh, that's right. You don't love shoes. Because the average person isn't going to care about their shoes. A sneakerhead, though,
they're not.
Is going to say, I got the LeBrons from 1 to 18 right now.
They're not going to say that, probably.
Which I respect. And the Dior's. Okay, the Dior's. Now, that's probably going to go in the show notes. Like, maybe I'll get an affiliate link to some sort of StockX, and I'll be like,
I'm a big fan of Dior's creative designer right now. It's always the story behind the shoe, like the crafting of the shoe. That you got to have a good craft for me to like love it. So that's one.
Well, respect. Well, thanks, Sojo. I really appreciate it, man. I'll let you know when it's up.
All right, man. Love you.
This episode of the podcast was brought to you by MetaShare. Text Jon, Jon, to 474747 for more information. Huge thank you to MetaShare for sponsoring it. Jon to 474747.
Thanks for listening. To learn more about the All It Takes Is a Goal podcast and to get access to today's show notes, transcript, and exclusive content from Jon Acuff, visit acuff.me/podcast. Thanks again for joining us. Be sure to tune in next week for another episode of the All It Takes Is a Goal podcast.